The past is never dead. It's not even past. William Faulkner's words ring eerily true when it comes to the Baghdad Battery. Discovered over 80 years ago, this ancient artifact continues to challenge our understanding of history. Today, we're diving deep into its mysteries, and what we've found might shock you. It's 1936, and the sands of Khujut Rabu'a, just outside Baghdad, are about to give up a secret that's puzzled experts for decades. A team of archaeologists is carefully brushing away layers of dirt, revealing something unexpected. At first glance, it looks like an ordinary clay pot. But as they clean it off, they realize this is no ordinary find. The jar itself is about 5.5 inches tall, made of light yellow clay. But it's what's inside that catches everyone off guard. Instead of the usual grave goods, there's a copper cylinder, and inside that, an iron rod. Now, copper and iron aren't exactly rare in ancient Mesopotamian artifacts, but this particular arrangement, that's new. The copper cylinder is soldered shut at the bottom with a cap of the same material. The iron rod appears to have been stuck through an asphalt plug, keeping it centered in the copper tube without touching the sides. Here's where things get interesting. This setup bears a striking resemblance to, well, we'll get to that in a bit. For now, let's compare it to other finds from the area. Pottery from this period typically contains everyday items, but a metal tube with an iron rod, that's not in the usual catalogue. The archaeologists are scratching their heads. What could this thing be for? Some suggest it might be a scroll case, but the design seems overly complicated for that purpose. Others wonder if it's some kind of religious artifact, but there's no precedent for anything quite like this in known Mesopotamian rituals. As they examine it more closely, a few of the team members start to get a strange feeling. The arrangement of metals, the careful insulation, it almost looks like it could conduct... No, that's impossible, right? The experts are well and truly stumped. They carefully pack up the artifact, along with several others found nearby, and send them off to the museum in Baghdad for further study. Little do they know, this unassuming clay pot is about to spark a controversy that will last for decades. As word spreads about the strange find, theories start to fly. What was this mysterious object used for? Why go to the trouble of creating such an intricate internal structure? And why have we never found anything quite like it before? But before we dive into the theories, let's take a closer look at the man who first proposed an explanation so shocking, it's still debated today. Imagine you're an expert in ancient artifacts, and you come across something that looks suspiciously like a modern device. That's exactly what happened to Wilhelm König when he examined the mysterious jar from Baghdad. His conclusion? It was electrifying. Wilhelm König wasn't your average archaeologist. As the director of the National Museum of Iraq in the late 1930s, he had seen his fair share of ancient treasures. But when he laid eyes on the clay jar from Khujut Rabu'a, something clicked in his mind. König's background wasn't limited to archaeology. He had a keen interest in the history of science and technology. As he studied the jar, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd seen this arrangement before. Not in ancient Mesopotamia, but in modern laboratories. Here's how a simple battery works. You need two different metals and an electrolyte solution. The metals react with the solution, creating a flow of electrons, electricity. Now think about the Baghdad jar. Could the space between the copper cylinder and iron rod have once held some kind of liquid? König's mind was racing. He started comparing the jar's structure to early 19th century batteries. The similarities were striking. The voltaic pile, invented in 1800, used alternating discs of copper and zinc, with brine-soaked cardboard between them. The Baghdad jar seemed like a cruder version of the same idea. But wait, if this was really a battery, that would mean... No, it couldn't be. The jar was dated to the Parthian period, sometime between 250 BC and 224 AD. That's nearly 2 millennia before the official invention of the battery. Could ancient Mesopotamians have discovered electricity? Koenig spent years carefully examining the evidence, comparing the jar to other artifacts, and researching ancient Mesopotamian technology. Finally, in 1938, he felt ready to share his findings with the world. His paper, published in the journal Forschungen und Fortschritte, sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. Koenig proposed that the clay jar was an ancient electric battery. He suggested that a vinegar solution could have served as the electrolyte, producing a small electric current. Koenig's hypothesis was bold. He was implying that ancient people understood the principles of electricity and deliberately constructed a device to harness it. This challenged everything historians thought they knew about the development of human technology. The reaction from Koenig's peers was divided. Some were intrigued by the idea, seeing it as a potentially groundbreaking discovery. Others were skeptical, pointing out the lack of supporting evidence and the enormous implications of such a claim. The debate would rage on for decades. Was the Baghdad Battery really an ancient power source, or was Koenig seeing what he wanted to see, projecting modern knowledge onto an artifact with a more mundane purpose? As news of Koenig's theory spread, scientists, historians, and even electrical engineers began weighing in. Some sought to replicate the supposed battery, while others dug deeper into ancient texts, looking for any mention of electrical phenomena. The controversy was just beginning, and it would take us to some unexpected places. The Baghdad Battery sparked a firestorm in the archaeological world, igniting a debate that still rages today. When Koenig's theory hit the scientific community, it was met with a mix of excitement and skepticism. Some researchers were thrilled by the idea that this humble clay pot could rewrite the history of human technological development. Others weren't so quick to jump on board. Let's break down the arguments. The jar's structure does resemble a simple galvanic cell, and it can produce a small electric current when filled with an acidic liquid. That's pretty compelling evidence for the battery theory, but skeptics argue that the jar's design could have had a totally different purpose. Maybe it was used for storing sacred scrolls or as part of a religious ritual we don't understand. The real problem: context. In archaeology, context is everything. Where exactly was the jar found? What other artifacts were nearby? What was written on the walls of the building it came from? Unfortunately, a lot of this information was lost or never recorded in the first place. Another big issue for the battery theory is the lack of written evidence. The Parthians left behind plenty of texts, but not a single one mentions anything about electricity or batteries. You'd think if they had this technology, someone would have bothered to write it down. So where does that leave us? The scientific community remains divided. Some researchers are convinced the Baghdad Battery is exactly what Koenig said it was. Others think it's just an ordinary jar that we're reading too much into. And plenty of experts are somewhere in the middle, intrigued by the possibility but not quite ready to rewrite the history books. But science doesn't just rely on debate, it needs evidence. That's why some clever folks decided to put Koenig's theory to the test by building their own versions of the Baghdad Battery. These modern experiments have yielded interesting results, but they haven't definitively settled the debate. They've shown that it's possible to generate a small electric current using ancient materials, but questions remain about whether this was the jar's intended purpose. As we continue to study the Baghdad Battery, we're left with more questions than answers. Was this really an ancient power source? Or are we projecting our modern understanding onto an artifact with a completely different purpose? The debate continues, reminding us that in archaeology, sometimes the most intriguing discoveries are the ones that challenge our assumptions about the past. Scientists around the world are reconstructing a piece of ancient technology that could change our understanding of history, the Baghdad Battery. As they assemble their replicas, they're wondering, will these modern versions actually work, or will they end up as another unsolved historical mystery? These archaeological detectives are putting the Baghdad Battery to the test. They're working with limited information, since the original artifact is old and some parts are missing. So they have to make educated guesses about how it might have worked. One big question is what to use for the electrolyte solution, the liquid that helps electricity flow. Researchers try a few different options that would have been available to ancient people and can conduct electricity. The metals used in the battery might seem odd at first, but they actually work pretty well together. Copper is great at conducting electricity, and iron serves as the other electrode. When these metals interact with an acidic solution, they create a small electric current. It's not much, but it's enough to make a little spark. Once the replicas are built, it's time to test them. The researchers connect their voltmeters and wait. And hold on, is that needle moving? Yes, you heard that right. These replicas actually produce electricity. We're not talking about enough power to light up a city, though. Most experiments show a voltage of about 0.8 to 2 volts. For comparison, a modern AA battery produces about 1.5 volts, so we're in the same ballpark. Here's where it gets really interesting. Some researchers have managed to connect several of these batteries together. When they do that, they can generate enough electricity to electroplate small objects with gold. That's right, these ancient-inspired devices can actually perform a task that requires electricity. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Just because we can make these replicas work doesn't prove that's what they were actually used for in ancient times. We need more evidence to make that leap. So, where does this leave us? We've got proof that the Baghdad Battery could have worked as a battery, but we're still not sure if it was actually used that way. It's a classic archaeological puzzle. We've got a piece that fits, but we can't see the whole picture. As our scientists finish their experiments, they're left with more questions than answers. If this really was a battery, what did the ancient Parthians use it for? Was it a tool for electroplating, a medical device, or something we haven't even thought of yet? The true purpose of the Baghdad Battery might be even more surprising than we imagine. You've heard of the Midas touch, but what about the Baghdad zap? Some scientists believe the ancient Parthians may have used the Baghdad Battery for a crude form of electroplating. But here's the catch. If they were creating golden artifacts, where are they now? Let's break down this shiny theory. The idea that ancient people might have stumbled upon this technique is pretty wild. Some researchers have managed to string together several replica Baghdad batteries and generate enough electricity to electroplate small objects with gold. It's not exactly high-tech, but it works. Now, before we get too excited about ancient Parthians with gold-plated everything, let's look at what we actually know about their gilding techniques. They were pretty skilled at applying gold leaf, basically super thin sheets of gold hammered onto other materials. They also used a method called fire gilding, where they'd mix gold with mercury, apply it to an object, and then heat it up to vaporize the mercury. Presto! Golden statue. These traditional methods were time-consuming and used a lot of valuable gold. Electroplating, if they could do it, would have been way more efficient. You could coat large objects with a much thinner layer of gold, stretching your precious metal supply further. Plus, it would stick better than gold leaf. So, what evidence supports this electroplating theory? Well, there's the battery itself. We know it can produce a small electric current. Some researchers point to unusually thin and even gold coatings on a few ancient artifacts as potential evidence of electroplating. But here's where our golden theory starts to lose its luster. If the Parthians were zapping gold onto everything, where are all these electroplated treasures? We should be finding tons of artifacts with telltale signs of this technique. But we're not. Not a single confirmed electroplated object has been found from this time period. The evidence just isn't there to back up the electroplating hypothesis. It's possible the Parthians experimented with the technique, but if they did, they didn't leave behind any clear proof. So where does this leave us? The electroplating theory is intriguing, but it's got some serious problems. As we pack away our imaginary ancient gold-plating workshop, we're left wondering, if the Baghdad Battery wasn't used for making fancy jewelry, what was it for? Maybe it had a completely different purpose. Some researchers have suggested it might have been used for medical treatments. Others think it could have played a role in religious ceremonies. Let's explore these ideas and see if we can shock some life into this ancient mystery. Imagine a world where electricity was seen as a mystical force, capable of curing ailments and easing suffering. It might sound like science fiction, but some researchers believe the Baghdad Battery could have been an ancient medical device. Let's examine the evidence and see if this theory has any spark to it. In the ancient world, medical practices were a mix of the practical and the bizarre. Herbal remedies and basic surgeries existed alongside treatments we'd consider pretty out there today. Think bloodletting, trepanation, that's drilling holes in the skull, and the liberal use of leeches. Some ancient texts mention treatments that sound surprisingly similar to modern electrotherapy. For example, ancient Roman texts describe using electric fish to treat headaches and gout. The numbing effect of their shocks was seen as a way to relieve pain. Now let's think about how electricity affects our bodies. Mild electrical currents can interfere with pain signals, essentially tricking our nerves into feeling better. It's the same principle behind modern TENS, transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation units, used for pain management today. So, could the Baghdad Battery have been an early version of a TENS unit? While modern devices use currents between 10 to 30 milliamps, our ancient battery's output was much weaker. Some researchers argue that even this small current could have had a noticeable effect if applied directly to the skin, especially since ancient people might have been more sensitive to electrical sensations. But here's where the medical theory starts to short-circuit. First, there's no physical evidence of electrodes or other devices that would have been needed to apply the current to the body. We haven't found any ancient medical tools that look like they could connect to our battery. Then there's the question of knowledge. While ancient texts mention electric fish, there's no clear indication that people understood electricity as a concept, let alone how to generate or use it. It's a big leap from fish zaps make pain go away to let's build a device to make our own zaps. So where does this leave our medical mystery? Well, it's an intriguing idea, but the evidence is pretty thin. It's possible that someone, somewhere, might have experimented with the battery for pain relief, but it's unlikely to have been a widespread or intentional medical practice. As we close the book on our imaginary ancient pain clinic, we're left wondering, if not for medicine, what else could this battery have been used for? Some researchers have suggested an even more mystical purpose. What if the Baghdad Battery wasn't meant to heal bodies, but to awe minds? Let's explore the idea that this ancient power source might have played a role in religious ceremonies and priestly magic. We've seen how the Baghdad Battery probably wasn't zapping away ancient headaches, but what if it had a more divine purpose? Imagine standing in a temple when suddenly a god statue comes to life with a crackle of energy. Coincidence or ancient special effects? In ancient Mesopotamia, temples were the centers of society where priests acted as intermediaries between mortals and gods. Could these holy men have had a secret weapon? A small electrical charge might make a worshipper feel touched by a god, or make a statue's eyes seem to glow. In a world that didn't understand electricity, these effects could appear supernatural. But let's not get carried away. We're talking about very small amounts of electricity here. The Baghdad Battery wouldn't have been powering any giant displays. Still, in a dimly lit temple, Even a tiny spark could seem magical. Ancient priests weren't above using trickery to enhance their rituals. In Egypt, they used hidden speaking tubes to make statues talk. In Greece, temples had hydraulic systems to open doors by themselves. So, using a crude battery for religious special effects isn't completely far-fetched. Here's the problem. If priests were using the Baghdad Battery this way, shouldn't we find some evidence? Maybe metal statues with suspicious wiring, or temple walls with scorch marks. We haven't found anything like that. Not a single artifact from this time and place shows clear signs of electrical use in religious contexts. So where does that leave us? It's a cool idea, but it's looking pretty shaky. Maybe a few priests experimented with the battery, but if they did, they didn't leave behind any smoking guns or sparking statues in this case. As we leave our imaginary electrified temple behind, we're faced with a familiar problem. The Baghdad Battery keeps hinting at amazing possibilities, but the evidence just isn't there to back them up. So if it wasn't for medicine, and probably wasn't for religious magic, what was this mysterious object actually used for? Sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one, and in archaeology, boring answers are often correct. So let's set aside our visions of ancient electrical marvels for a moment. What if the Baghdad Battery wasn't a battery at all? What if its true purpose was something so ordinary we've been overlooking it this whole time? What if the key to unlocking the Baghdad Battery's secrets isn't in its ability to generate power, but in its power to preserve? We're about to explore a hypothesis that's so ordinary, it just might be extraordinary. Ancient people loved their scrolls. They wrote on them, stored information on them, and went to great lengths to protect them. Some researchers argue that our mysterious battery might actually be a fancy container for important papers. At first glance, it might seem a bit over-engineered for a scroll case. But let's break it down. The outer clay jar provides the first line of defense against the elements. Clay's great at keeping out moisture and pests. Inside, you've got that copper cylinder. Copper's naturally antimicrobial, which means it can help prevent mold and bacteria from growing on precious documents. The iron rod? When it rusts, it absorbs oxygen, potentially creating a low oxygen environment that further preserves the contents. Now let's look at how ancient people actually stored their important documents. We know they used a variety of materials: clay tablets, papyrus, parchment. Each had its own preservation needs. Papyrus, for example, is pretty fragile stuff. It doesn't like humidity, and it can get brittle over time. So, a container that keeps out moisture, prevents bacterial growth, and reduces oxygen levels. That's starting to sound pretty good for long-term document storage. It's not as exciting as an ancient electric device, but it's a lot more practical. Here's where things get interesting. Similar jars have been found in other archaeological sites, some containing scroll fragments. These containers, often made of clay with metal components, have been discovered in various parts of the ancient Near East. At Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, archaeologists even discovered documents written on thin sheets of copper, chosen for their durability. Does this prove that the Baghdad Battery was definitely a scroll case? No, but it offers a compelling alternative to the electricity theories. It's a reminder that sometimes the most mundane explanation can be the correct one. As we wrap up our journey through ancient office supplies, it's worth considering why this matters. The Baghdad Battery, whether it's a power source or a paper preserver, highlights a crucial aspect of archaeology. Context is key. Without knowing exactly where and how an artifact was found, we're left guessing at its true purpose. So, what's next for our mysterious jar? Well, that's where things get really interesting, because sometimes the story of how we interpret an artifact can tell us as much about ourselves as it does about the past. But before we dive into that, let's take a moment to appreciate the ingenuity of ancient people. whether they were harnessing electricity or just trying to keep their paperwork dry. We've explored many angles of the Baghdad Battery, but there's a huge gap in our knowledge that's been right in front of us. It's all about what we can't know and why those missing pieces matter more than you might think. In archaeology, context is crucial. The Baghdad Battery's original excavation in the 1930s left us with some serious blind spots. We don't know exactly where in the site it was found, what other artifacts were nearby, or if there were more batteries that didn't survive. This lack of information severely limits our understanding. What are we missing? We don't know if the jar was found in a home, a workshop, or a temple. We have no clue about any tools or objects that might have been found with it. Any inscriptions or markings at the original site? Gone. Even worse, we have no idea if there were any traces left of the electrolyte solution that might have been inside when it was discovered. Another mystery. We don't know how common these jars were. Was this a unique object, or were there many of them? If it was some kind of advanced technology, you'd expect to find more than one. But if it was just a fancy container, it might be pretty rare. Archaeologists are still finding ways to learn from this mysterious object. New imaging techniques might reveal hidden details. Comparing it to other artifacts from the same period could provide clues. Maybe someone will even discover an ancient text that mentions something suspiciously battery-like. But here's the harsh truth. We might never know for sure what the Baghdad Battery was really used for. Without that crucial context from its discovery, we're left with a really old, really weird jar that could have been anything from a power source to an ancient office supply. Where do we go from here? Well, that's where things get interesting. The gaps in our knowledge have created the perfect environment for wild theories and speculation. The Baghdad Battery has sparked some truly out-there ideas. We're about to explore a world of ancient aliens, electric pyramids, and lost civilizations. Get ready for a journey through some of the strangest corners of archaeological speculation. Remember that weird kid in school who always had a far-fetched explanation for everything? Well, he grew up and got really into archaeology. Now, let's see how a mysterious clay pot from ancient Iraq became proof of everything from alien visitations to lost super civilizations. The Baghdad Battery has become a favorite toy for pseudo-archaeologists and conspiracy theorists. These folks take this ancient artifact and use it as evidence for some pretty wild claims. Here's where things get crazy. Some say ancient aliens used the Baghdad Battery as a power source for their advanced technology. They claim these extraterrestrial visitors taught early humans how to harness electricity, helping them build the pyramids and other ancient wonders. Because apparently, good old-fashioned engineering just wasn't impressive enough. Others argue that the Baghdad Battery is evidence of a lost super-civilization. They believe an advanced society existed thousands of years ago, with technology rivaling or even surpassing our own. This high-tech utopia supposedly vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a few tantalizing clues like our mysterious clay pot. Now, you might be wondering why we don't see more evidence of these amazing technologies. Where are the ancient power grids or Egyptian circuit boards? The fact is, we don't. What we do see are a lot of well-understood tools and technologies that explain how ancient people built amazing things without needing sci-fi gadgets. So why do these ideas appeal to so many people? Well, they're exciting. It's way cooler to imagine ancient aliens or lost super civilizations than to think about people slowly figuring things out over thousands of years. These theories also make people feel special, like they're in on a big secret that others are too blind to see. But here's the problem. When we start misinterpreting archaeological evidence to fit these wild theories, we lose sight of what's really amazing about ancient civilizations. We forget that real people, with the same brains we have today, figured out incredible things using the resources available to them. That's way more impressive than assuming they had help from space visitors or lost technology. Real archaeologists and historians look at the Baghdad Battery and see something different. They see evidence of ancient people experimenting, innovating, and trying to understand their world. Maybe it was a battery, maybe it wasn't. But either way, it shows that our ancestors were clever, curious, and always pushing the boundaries of what they knew. So next time you hear someone claim that the Baghdad Battery proves ancient people had smartphones or hoverboards, remember this. The real story of human ingenuity and discovery is way more interesting than any alien conspiracy. And who knows? Maybe someday we'll find that missing piece of evidence that finally tells us what this weird little jar was really for. Until then, let's appreciate the mystery and the ancient minds that created it. The Parthian Empire, ruling from 247 BCE to 224 CE, was a hub of innovation and technological advancement. Stretching from the Euphrates to India's borders, their unique position between Rome and China made them masters of cultural exchange and adaptation. The Parthians developed impressive technologies that often go overlooked. Their most famous innovation, the Parthian shot, was more than just a cool archery trick. This military tactic gave their cavalry a significant advantage in battle, changing the way wars were fought. But their achievements went far beyond warfare. The Parthians were architectural geniuses, developing techniques for building massive, freestanding domes without concrete. How did they do it? They used specially shaped bricks and clever weight distribution. These domes allowed for large, open interior spaces, perfect for palaces and temples. In the realm of science, the Parthians built on earlier Mesopotamian knowledge. They made accurate celestial observations, developed complex calendars, and even had their own version of the zodiac. Their position at the crossroads of the ancient world allowed them to adopt and adapt technologies from all over. They learned advanced metalworking from the Greeks, picked up new armor and weapon styles from Central Asia, and may have been among the first to bring silk production westward from China. Why don't we hear more about these achievements? History tends to focus on the flashy and the victorious. The Parthians eventually lost to the Sasanian Persians, and many of their innovations were practical rather than spectacular. Improved irrigation systems and more efficient trade routes don't make for exciting headlines, but they were crucial to the empire's success. The Parthians' real legacy lies in their ability to take existing ideas, improve them, and apply them in new ways. They were experimenters and innovators, pushing the boundaries of what was possible with the materials and knowledge they had. This approach to innovation, adapting, improving, and practically applying knowledge, is how real technological progress happens, both then and now. In the end, the Parthian Empire's true importance isn't in mythical lost technology, but in the very real story of a civilization that thrived through adaptation and innovation. They made the most of their place in the world, leaving behind a legacy of practical ingenuity that's worth remembering and learning from. The Parthians' legacy of innovation is impressive, but our modern perspective might be skewing our interpretation. When we examine ancient artifacts, we often unconsciously apply our current knowledge and values. This can lead us to misunderstand their true purpose or significance. Take the Baghdad Battery, for example. Our electricity-centric minds immediately jump to power generation. But what if we're completely missing the point? What if ancient peoples used electrical phenomena in ways we can't even imagine? This challenges our view of human technological development as a neat, linear progression. We've misinterpreted ancient objects before. The Antikythera mechanism and Roman dodecahedrons are prime examples of artifacts that defied initial explanations. These cases highlight the importance of considering historical context. We need to think about the problems ancient people were trying to solve, their available materials, and their cultural beliefs. Maybe the Baghdad Battery served a purpose we haven't considered because we're too focused on finding ancient tech that mirrors our own. Every new discovery has the potential to reshape our understanding of the past. Tomorrow, we might unearth an artifact that proves ancient civilizations had technologies we've never dreamed of. Or we might find they solved problems in ways totally foreign to our modern mindset. Ancient ingenuity often surprises us. Our ancestors weren't less intelligent, they just had different knowledge and needs. The more we study history, the more we realize how clever and resourceful they were. As we debate the true purpose of the Baghdad Battery, let's keep an open mind. Whether it was a power source, a religious object, or something else entirely, it's a testament to human creativity and problem solving. And who knows, maybe someday we'll look back at our current theories and be amazed at how wrong we were. That's the beauty of archaeology. The story is never really finished. What if a single clay pot could rewrite the entire history of human technological development? That's the tantalizing possibility that keeps archaeologists up at night. The Baghdad Battery is a curious artifact with the potential to change our understanding of ancient technology. But before we start revising textbooks, let's explore what it really takes to overturn centuries of established history. Imagine if the Baghdad Battery was conclusively proven to be an ancient electrical device. We'd have to completely rethink the timeline of technological progress. Suddenly, we'd be looking at the possibility of electrical knowledge existing nearly 2 millennia before Alessandro Volta invented the modern battery. This would affect how we view the Parthians and ripple through our entire understanding of ancient science, trade, and cultural exchange. But hold on a second. Before we get carried away with visions of ancient power grids, let's talk about what it really takes to verify these kinds of claims. Archaeology isn't just about making cool discoveries, it's about rigorous analysis and peer review. When someone suggests a paradigm-shifting interpretation of an artifact, it kicks off a whole process of scrutiny. Experts examine the object, compare it to similar artifacts, look for supporting evidence, and consider alternative explanations. They try to replicate the proposed function using period-appropriate materials and techniques. This process can take years, even decades. Remember the Antikythera mechanism? It took over a century of study before we really understood what it was. So where are we with the Baghdad Battery? Well, the jury's still out. While some researchers are convinced it was an electrical device, the current evidence just doesn't support rewriting the history books yet. We don't have any other examples of electrical technology from the time. We don't have any written records describing its use, and the proposed electrical function, while possible, isn't the only explanation for its design. But here's the thing. The lack of conclusive proof doesn't make the Baghdad Battery any less fascinating. In fact, it's the mystery itself that makes it so valuable to archaeology. It forces us to question our assumptions, to look at ancient artifacts with fresh eyes, and to consider possibilities we might otherwise overlook. As research continues, who knows what we might discover? Maybe we'll find more evidence that supports the battery theory, or maybe we'll uncover a completely different purpose for this enigmatic object. Either way, the Baghdad Battery reminds us that history is never truly settled. There's always more to learn, more to question, and more to imagine about our ancient past. While we've explored various theories about the Baghdad Battery, from ancient electric lights to alien tech drops, the truth remains elusive. This little clay pot with metal bits inside has us questioning everything we thought we knew about ancient technology. It's a reminder that our ancestors were far more innovative than we sometimes give them credit for. The real challenge lies in the lack of context. We don't know exactly where it was found, what was around it, or if there were more like it. It's this missing information that keeps archaeologists coming back to the mystery. But here's the thing, the Baghdad Battery's greatest value might just be in the questions it makes us ask. It forces us to challenge our assumptions about the past and consider that there's still a lot we don't know about our own history. Every time someone looks at this artifact, they're pushed to think outside the box and consider new possibilities about what ancient people were capable of. This is huge for archaeology. It gets people excited about ancient artifacts in a way that ordinary objects just can't match. Suddenly, everyone's an amateur archaeologist, coming up with their own theories and asking questions. And sometimes, those wild ideas lead to real breakthroughs. So what's next for our mysterious jar? Maybe tomorrow some scientist will invent a new way to analyze ancient residues and we'll finally figure out what was inside it. Or perhaps we'll uncover some long-lost Parthian text that describes exactly what these things were for. The possibilities are endless, and that's what makes archaeology so exciting. But wait, where is this famous artifact now? Well, that's where our story takes an unexpected turn. Let's find out what happened to the Baghdad Battery in more recent times and why its current status is almost as mysterious as its ancient purpose. The National Museum of Iraq in Baghdad was a treasure trove of ancient artifacts, including the mysterious Baghdad Battery. For years, researchers could examine it up close, debating its purpose and marveling at its construction. But everything changed in 2003. As coalition forces entered Baghdad, chaos erupted. Looters broke into the museum, smashing displays and grabbing whatever they could carry. Thousands of artifacts vanished in days, items that had survived for millennia gone in an instant. Ancient sculptures, cuneiform tablets, intricate jewelry, all disappeared. And among the missing, you guessed it, the Baghdad Battery. The international community sprang into action. Interpol sent out alerts worldwide. Museums and auction houses were told to watch for suspicious items. Some pieces made their way back home through seizures or voluntary returns. But what about our battery? Well, that's where things get frustrating. Despite all the searching, all the alerts, all the pleas for its return, nothing. It's like the battery vanished into thin air. Some experts worry it might have been destroyed, either during the looting or by someone who didn't understand its significance. Others hope it's still out there somewhere, maybe in a private collection or hidden away in a warehouse. So where does this leave us? The Baghdad Battery, once a tangible link to our ancient past, is now just another ghost in the archaeological record. Its disappearance is a loss for all of us who want to understand our shared human history. That's the real tragedy here. Whether it was an ancient power source or just a fancy jar, the Baghdad Battery had more stories to tell. Now those stories are on hold, maybe forever. It's a stark reminder of how fragile our connections to the past can be and why protecting cultural heritage is so important. As we wrap up our journey through the battery's history, let's think about what we can learn from all this. How do we make sure future generations get to experience the wonder of touching something made thousands of years ago? That's a challenge we all need to take seriously. The Baghdad Battery is a fascinating window into the ingenuity of our ancestors. Whether it was a primitive power source or something entirely different, it shows ancient peoples were constantly experimenting and innovating. We might never know its true purpose, but that's okay. The real value of the Baghdad Battery is how it sparks our imagination and challenges our assumptions about the past. As archaeologists unearth new mysteries, these artifacts reveal where we came from and how we got here. They're not just relics, they're keys to understanding our history. The Baghdad Battery reminds us that there's still so much to learn about our ancestors. Who knows what other ancient oddities might completely change our view of the past? That's the exciting thing about archaeology. Every dig has the potential to rewrite history as we know it.